Hello guys, it's that time again. It's the Elevate Online Experience. It's an absolute pleasure having you. Buckle up for an amazing message.
Well, hey there, Elevate friends and family. Great to have you with us today. Now, chances are when it comes to a new calendar year, many of you are probably, like me, in the habit of maybe making some New Year's resolutions. You know, things around improving your health, working on your relationships, maybe some course of study to be more effective in your role, maybe, change of job or change of city, country, all of those sorts of things. Pretty standard practice. Well, here in Australia, it's July, and July marks the beginning of a new financial year for us Aussies. And so I just want to put some of the same notions in play to say that in a new financial year, let's take the opportunity to make some new financial year resolutions, and particularly learning how to better manage money. Because look, like life, when it comes to our finances, some of the same rules apply. It's easy to get into some bad financial habits. It's easy to kind of have our priorities maybe get out of whack. Maybe have some areas that just kind of been overlooked or just not quite working optimally. So here we are as we launch the new financial year, taking the opportunity to make some new financial year resolutions. So here's a question. Any purgers out there? Minimalists, declutterers, Marie Kondoers? Yeah, okay, sure. Chances are you're married to a hoarder, but anyway. Remember a few years ago, my mum was moving house, and so we had to, sell her house. And one of the things when you sell a house and move, if you've ever been through that experience, is it is a golden opportunity to purge. And so we're going through her things, and I got to this particular area of her house where there was just files and files and files of paperwork. Alongside that was boxes and boxes and boxes of paperwork. Alongside that, there was plastic shopping bags full of paperwork. And so, she said, well, they're sensitive documents, they're financial documents. I was raised to that you just don't throw anything away. And I'm like, okay, all right. So I started going through these, and I ended up discovering electricity bills from the 1970s, hard copy bank books where they used to stamp and handwrite deposits and withdrawals. There was checkbooks, just the butts left from the 80s, and the list went on. Needless to say, the shredder got a heck of a workout from all that sort of stuff. But look, the reality is that can be like indicative of our lives. And we can just allow things to accumulate, allow stuff to become normal, but it doesn't necessarily mean that that's optimal. Let me show you something that Paul wrote to the church in Rome, which is very much a principle that we can apply to every area of our life, including how we think about finances. Paul encouraged the church, and this applies to us today, don't copy the behavior and customs of this world, but instead let God transform you into a new person by changing the way you think. Then you will learn to know God's will for you, which is good and pleasing and perfect. So we're entering this new financial year, and I want to invite you to change your thinking when it comes to financial management, and ultimately, therefore, change your life. Out with the old and make room for the new. Now, one of the things I've noticed as I've led churches for several decades now is, generally speaking, where people get things wrong when it comes to navigating financial management is essentially there's like two ditches on the side of the road. One ditch is to have a poverty mindset, or it's sometimes known as a scarcity mindset. And it's motivated by this fear of not having enough, of never going to have enough, of always being broke. It causes people to just conclude that they can't be generous, because if they were to be generous, then they would be left with less. And by the way, people that are in this space, they're on high alert right now with the cost of living increases. It's like panic stations. And well, that's given rise to a couple of memes. There's this one here. The 5-second rule has now been extended to 10 seconds. That might be helpful information. And this one, due to inflation, the back of the mullet is now for business as well. But here's the reality, and I hope you were encouraged by this thought. While the increased cost of living may have caught some of us off guard, and even some economists, professionals in this space off guard, it didn't catch God off guard. And his principles for financial management are timeless. And so if you're operating out of a poverty mindset full of fear, and then come on this journey with us, because God wants to get you out of that ditch and get you moving forward. Now, the ditch on the other side of the road is a materialism mindset. And this is very prevalent in our culture, where too many people have an excessive emphasis, or place an excessive emphasis on the accumulation of money and possessions, and that typically causes them to overconsume. In some cases, it causes people to spend more than they earn, and we've kind of normalized consumer debt. It's just like you just have it. Everyone has it. Just live with it. Just pay it off as best you can. But that ushers in a whole nother avenue for stress. It's like when you start living with consumer debt, spending more than you earn, you're in a ditch on the other side of the road, and that robs you of making eternal kingdom impact when it comes to finances. So, hey, here we are. It's July. Maybe time for some shredding. Old ways of thinking when it comes to finances. And we teach a series on financial management every single year at Elevate Church. And look, the reasons are simple. It's one of the top things that couples fight about. It's one of the top things that families divide over. It's one of the top things that people worry and stress about. And if we're not careful, just the whole area of finances can kind of consume so much of our life. So this year, starting today, is our new series on financial management called Making Change. And over the next 4 weeks in this series, starting today, we're going to teach on God's timeless principles for financial management. And here's our prayer for you. Our prayer for you is, if you come on this journey, and as you come on this journey through this series, that you will experience less fear, less stress, less anxiety, more peace, more joy, more freedom, and more opportunity. Come to know that God is your provider, and then you can trust him with his provision for every season and every circumstance in your life. Now, if you want to take a deeper dive, then go back to last year's series on financial management. We talked called Recession Proof Your Life. That's very much a companion to what we're teaching this year. Now, Paul made it very clear, do not copy the behavior and customs of this world. And I like to show it this way, that we live in a prevailing culture, but we're called to live according to kingdom culture. Now, there are some areas of life, and there are some areas of financial management where kingdom culture actually overlaps with prevailing culture. But the thing to identify is the area or areas of financial management where our prevailing culture doesn't intersect with kingdom culture. And God would want us to land and to live and to operate according to the principles of kingdom culture, because that's in the epicenter of His will. And that's where you're going to find breakthrough and peace and joy and freedom. So over the next few weeks, we're going to talk about things like debt, things like stress, the importance of savings. Today, launching this series, we're going to start with the thing that God actually instructs us to put first when it comes to financial management. Now, if you've got young kids, or if you've had young kids, maybe they're growing up now, or just, kind of know something about young kids, let me throw a reasonably plausible hypothetical scenario your way. Let's say you're out with the family and you're at juniors on board. Maybe you've gone to juniors sporting game on a Saturday afternoon. And the game finishes and you're heading home. You're thinking, you know what? Instead of going to the trouble of preparing dinner, what if we just stop through like KFC? We get a big family bucket of chicken, we get some mashed potato and gravy, we get some coleslaw, and just head home. So you pull into the drive-thru and you place your order. Then Junior yells from the back, Dad, can I have some chips as well? So you're like, yeah, sure. All right, we'll throw in some chips for Junior. Order comes, you take it home, set the table, put it all out, serve it all up, and you're there enjoying your chicken, enjoying your mashed potato, enjoying your coleslaw, and you look over and there's Junior, and he's got his chips as well. And you say to him, hey, buddy, mind if I have a chip? And Junior reaches forward and just kind of rakes all the chips closer to his chest. And he shakes his head. Nope. These are my chips. And you think to yourself, maybe even say this out loud, Junior, I think you've forgotten who I am, little dude. I think you've actually forgotten the nature of this relationship, because you're currently sitting in my house. And the only reason you're sitting in my house that I paid for is because I let you. And by the way, this table that you're sitting at, eating your chips, this is my table. That's my chair. And by the way, those clothes you're wearing, they're mine as well. And if I wanted to, I could go back to KFC and I could buy my own chips. Look, I could probably buy a packet of chips from KFC every day for the rest of my life. In fact, I could sell this house and that table and probably have enough chips to bury you under if I wanted to. But here's the thing. I'm just asking you to give me one of those chips that technically I own. And this is not a far-fetched story. Here's the reality. The reality is that some of us can be tempted to do this with God. And you're like, no, God, it's not your money. I'm the one that went to work and earned it. I'm the one that put up with the boring meetings and the toxic colleague. No. And if you didn't notice, it's paid into my bank account with my name on it. And when the tax office wants to take their slice, they don't come knocking on your door, they come knocking on my door. And so does the electric company and the bank and the telephone company. So, it's clearly my money. But the starting point when it comes to managing finances according to kingdom culture and kingdom principles is to acknowledge God's ownership. and not just of finances. I mean, David wrote it this way: the earth is the Lord's and everything in it. The world and all its people belong to him. So right off the bat, it's critical for us to understand that when it comes to finances, God owns it, and then he asks us to manage it. I want to show you something. Like the downside of thinking that we're the owners, that it's all our money. And it goes like this. We start with this idea that it's all my money. It sets off a chain reaction. When things aren't working properly, then guess what? It's all my problems because it's my money and I've got to fix it. And it's all my responsibility. I don't expect anybody's assistance. But I got to tell you, this sounds horrible. This sounds stressful. This is a whole lot of pressure. And if you think this way, that you're the owner, and with that, this chain reaction of your problems, your responsibility, no wonder so many people have so much stress and anxiety when it comes to finances. But from God's perspective, it doesn't have to work this way. There's a better way. The better way looks like this. Acknowledge first and foremost that it's all God's money, that he's the one that gives us the health, the ability to work, blesses us with the job or the business or the opportunities, that we have it because God provided it, that he's the owner and I'm the manager. And this too sets up a chain reaction, but it's a very different chain reaction. When things get sketchy, it's all our problems. We're in this together. It's a shared responsibility, and I'm going to trust that God's going to walk with me, lead me, and help me get through this together with his help. That just sounds like a much more peace-filled approach. So I said today we're going to start with the thing that God actually puts as the number one thing when it comes to managing finances from a kingdom standpoint. If you've got your smartphone camera, scan this flow code. It's going to take you to the last book of the old part of the Bible, the Old Testament. It's a book called Malachi. Now, Malachi was like a spokesperson for God. We call him a prophet in church world. And God would speak through him to the people, to God's followers. And here's an example of God speaking to his people. And here's an example of God actually reminding them of a framework and very much instructing us of a framework of what it looks like to partner with him when it comes to managing finances. So God instructs his people. Bring all the tithes, which means your first 10% of your income or your increase, into the storehouse, which is then the temple, now it's the local church, so there'll be enough food in my temple. And if you do, and so here's the thing, like that's the bit that God asks us to do, that's the condition. And he said, but if you do that, then here comes a promise, and it's an incredible promise. If you do, says the Lord of heaven's armies, I will, in response, open the windows of heaven for you. I'll pour out a blessing so great you won't have enough room to take it in. Try it. Put me to the test. So let me ask a rhetorical question. Who would like God to bless them with so much blessing that they can't contain it? But understand this principle, as with most of God's blessings, are triggered by something that he first asks of us, something that requires an act of obedience and faithfulness. And if we do that, it triggers his blessing. Now, over the years, when people come across this very specific verse, Malachi chapter 3, verse 10, some people push back. Like, oh, it's not a rule. you don't have to give God your first 10%. It's not a rule. Jesus set us free from all the rules. Okay, I'll come back to that. And look, I get the wariness. I get the wariness around churches teaching on giving because a lot of churches have abused this. It's been used for manipulation. It's been used for personal greed. So as I'm teaching this, let me assure you of something. I do lead Elevate Church as my paid employment, but I'm not on commission. It's not, my salary is set by our board and it doesn't go up and down, depending on our giving. And as our giving increases, you're not going to see me rolling around on my little 50cc Vespa, all blinged out, the gas pumps and the fancy horn. No, that's not us. That's not what we do. In fact, as a church, increased giving simply allows us to go further faster. It ensures that our ministry areas are better resourced, and in turn, we can more effectively reach more people and build more people. But going back to some of their objection, like, the tithe, the first 10%, it's not a rule. I agree. If I agree with you. In fact, I don't see it as a rule. I see it as an invitation. God's saying, if you actually put me first, if you prioritize me, if you trust me with the first of your income, the first of your increase, I commit to partner with you. I commit to get involved in your finances. And I say to myself, who wouldn't want the one who created it all and owns it all to want to get in with me in managing the portion that he blesses me with? Sounds like the deal that's too good to be true. And let me also point this out, and I'm going to point this out. I don't want this to sound like any sort of pressure. It's important that I unpack a thread that goes through this invitation that maybe is a bit easier to miss, specifically given that we're now thousands of years later. So, because here's the deal. When God spoke to his people through his spokesperson Malachi and instructed them to bring the tithe, the first 10%, into the temple, that was an agricultural society. So the first would have been the first-born animal, for example. It would have been the first 10% of your harvest. The first. And what we can draw out of this is that in and of itself required a next level of faith, because when you bring God the first, you bring that with no actual real world guarantee that there will be a second or a third. When you bring God the first 10%, or they in that era, in that culture, brought God the first 10% of their harvest, there was no guarantee that the next 90% was going to be good. It was going to last. It could have been captured. It could have been raided. It could have gotten disease. Anything could have happened to the remaining 90%. So the idea of bringing the first 10% was very much an act of faith, but it demonstrated, hey, God, I'm going to bring you the first 10%, and then I'm going to trust that you will bless and protect the rest. It's an invitation to walk in faith instead of fear, and it demonstrates that giving isn't God's way of getting something from us. It's ultimately God's way of getting something to us, which could be more money. I mean, in history, he has blessed people with more money. He owns it all, so he can do it again. So we can be open to that. But what if it was also, or sometimes alongside, things that money can't buy? That as we learn to walk in faith, demonstrated by trusting God with the first and the best, that we'll experience more peace, more joy, more freedom, and more opportunity. Now, about 20 years ago, I had the privilege of working alongside one of Perth's brightest Bible brain people. And we asked him to just give like a one-page summary. It was a pretty ambitious brief, one-page summary of the entire Bible when it comes to managing finances and specifically giving. Like, how would you lay that out? Just real simply, one-page executive summary. And he came back with this sentence that I've banked, that the overarching principle throughout the entire Bible, God's entire history, is that this idea of the tithe, or the first 10%, is both a goal and a minimum. The idea that's a goal, the idea that if you are yet to get in the game when it comes to giving, that first of all, make the idea of bringing and giving to God your first 10% a goal. But it acknowledges the idea that if you're currently not giving, that potentially this number of 10% might seem incredibly daunting and may actually result in failure to launch. And so what we teach every single year is, if you're at 0%, if you're currently not giving anything, make 10% a goal and take a step in that direction. It could be 1%. It could be 2%. A faith stretch beyond where you're currently at, but just like move in that direction. If you've been giving for a while and you're not yet at 10%, take this opportunity, take this series, take this new financial year to say, you know what, God, I'm going to take a next step. I'm going to add another percent or another 2%, whatever it looks like. And look, it's always between you and God. We don't check. I will just make it easy for you. It's 2024. We have our app, our Elevate Church AU app, and there's a giving section in there. You can give from anywhere in the world using a debit card or a credit card. So that's just a way to give. But here's what I want to highlight. God said through Malachi, bring the first 10% into the temple. If you do, I'll open the floodgates of heaven and pour out a blessing so much you can't contain it. And then he says, test me in this. And it is the only time in all of history that God says, test me. In fact, elsewhere he says, do not test me. But in this specific instance, when it comes to us bringing God the first and the best of our finances, he says, test me. So here's what I want to put to you. Maybe set yourself up for a 90-day challenge, which kind of goes like this, that starting now, take your next step or your first step when it comes to giving, and keep it going every time your pay comes in, give for the next 90 days. And if at the end of that 90 days, like set the calendar reminder, if at the end of that 90 days you feel like your life is less because you've been giving, consider stopping. Like, God, I put you to the test and you failed, so I'm out. Well, that's between you and God, but hey, give it a try. All right. We'll see you back here next week, week 2 of Making Change. We're going to be talking about stress and debt and how to ensure that we can experience more joy, more peace, more freedom, and more opportunities when it comes to our finances. See you then.